Good morning, all. I'd like to thank you all for being able to attend today's security assessment briefing. We did it on the Robert A. Kalka Metropolitan Skyport, and henceforth we'll be calling it RAPIDS. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the team here at Finals 4, which includes myself, Jay Rahimi, our senior consultants, Alex Bryant, Julian Pena, and DT Vindy, and to round it out, our consultants Logan Goins and Alexis Obey. Additionally, I want to extend thanks out to RAPIDS staff for being able to facilitate this assessment. As without your support, communication, and coordination, none of this would have been possible. For the assessment itself, Finals 4 was tasked to assess RAPIDS assets hosted in the cloud, as well as the local corporate, user, guest, and networks. We performed these assessments in 2 stages, the first being in Q4 of 2023, and the second being in Q1 of 2024. We were also requested to perform additional assessments for the Q4 2023 assessment and Q1 2024 assessment. We'll be talking about that a little bit in further in the presentation. All right. Regarding the results of the Q1 2024 assessment, we found that there were 22 industry and legal compliance findings, ranging from the payment card industry data security standard, otherwise known as PCI DSS, as well as TSA cybersecurity requirements for airports that included the most recent 2023 cybersecurity amendment. Overall, we found that there was a total of 37,500 non-compliance fines that RAPIDS could potentially face based on the PCI DSS framework. And also, we found that there was a potential for a data breach that would involve person identifiable information. We'll be talking about that during our key findings. For the security findings themselves, there were 26 in total, with 6 of them being critical enough to severely disrupt business operations or put risk to the safety of customers and staff. Overall, RAPIDS has a great security posture, with the best practice we observed being the secure guest network, as it is a common entry point for adversaries to take, as it is publicly available. With that, I'll pass it off to Alexis.
Thanks, Jacob. We chose to categorize our findings into 5 different categories, depending on both their business and technical impact. This allowed us to give you a holistic perspective on exactly where your most vulnerable and critical areas are. During our January assessment, we found a total of 20 new vulnerabilities, with 6 of these being deemed critical. We'd like to thank you for inviting us back for a second assessment, because not only were we able to find new vulnerabilities, but we were able to see just how much your system has evolved. During our previous assessment, we identified 12 findings. We're happy to report that over 27% have been properly mitigated, and 18% have progress made on them. We'd like to extend kudos to RAPIDS for elevating your security posture. In addition to our testing, we were also asked to perform a few more assessments. We were asked to assess the effectiveness of your anti-social engineering training. In order to do this, we sent a malicious email to one of your employees, as well as a malicious phone call to your IT help desk.
All right. Our team was also tasked with assessing 2 different radio emission sources. The first one being a potential, or verifying and identifying a potential signal jammer, and the second one being the analysis of the baggage check area. Next, I want to go over RAPIDS security strengths. So these are areas of RAPIDS security posture which exceed or meet industry best standards and practices. The first on the list is strong network segmentation. So this means that an adversary will have a difficult time spreading their cyber attack across the network. Next, we have active logging and monitoring. Our team found that RAPIDS employees had an amazing response time, and this really makes us want to work with RAPIDS in the future. Everyone that we interacted with was great. Next, I want to cover the secure guest network. So we found that secure guest network, or the guest network, was particularly resistant against our advances, and we want to compliment you on the security posture specifically.
Well, I mentioned some key security strengths. We also want to highlight some key critical findings from our assessment, with the first being unpatched critical infrastructure. During our assessment, we found several lingering unpatched systems, which led to the exploitation of those systems. This could, of course, lead to a significant financial loss and customer distrust. With that, we recommend that RAPIDS regularly patches and updates systems where possible. Our next key finding is in regards to weak passwords for services and service accounts. During our assessment, we noticed that critical business services were being controlled by services and services accounts that had weak passwords. This, of course, creates a significant public safety hazard, and with this, our recommendation is that Raccoons implements a strong password policy, not only for service accounts, but all accounts. Our last key finding is in regards to the discovery of unencrypted sensitive data. During our assessment, we were able to leak passenger boarding passes within the cloud infrastructure. This, in the event of a data breach, could lead to customer distrust and potential forgery. With this, our recommendation is that Raccoons ensures that all internal services are isolated and are not publicly exposed. With that, I'll pass it to you.
So moving on to compliance, final score assess Raccoon's network based on 3 different compliance frameworks. First, we have PCI DSS, or the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. This is a standard that companies must comply by in order to process credit cards. The scope of PCI DSS includes systems that actually process transactions and also any systems that impact this. We have assessed and found a total of 13 findings, and we have also assessed an estimated cost of monthly fines to be about $37,500. Non-compliance jeopardizes customer trust and may lead to the suspension of payment card processing privileges. Next, we have Chapter 49, Section 1520, Protection of SSI, or Sensitive Security Information. This would mean that TSA partners are supposed to comply and make sure that the documents that they store on their systems are SSI, or sensitive security. And this can include documents such as provided by TSA or DHS relating to the security of airports, vulnerability assessment, or security programs. Next, we have the TSA Cybersecurity 2023 Amendment. This amendment aimed towards reducing cybersecurity risks and overall improving cyber resilience in nation transportation systems. This is a recent change that was implemented to ensure cybersecurity for nation transportation systems. We have assessed and found 9 total related findings, and overall, we have found 22 compliance violations, and we would like to emphasize the importance of mitigating these compliance violations as they could negatively impact Raccoons.
In conclusion, Finals 4 have 4 overall topics for Raccoons to focus on in the future, with the first being authentication, where Raccoons should implement 2-factor authentication wherever possible. The second being configuration, in order to secure not only software, but all services to vendor-specific security recommendations, which can be found on their website. Third, patching, being not only to implement a regular patching schedule, but to test patches prior to putting them on your production environments to make sure there's no downtime with critical services. And lastly, policies, to implement a strong password policy wherever possible, because during our assessment, we found passwords to be secure in some places and insecure in other places. And overall, having a firm-wide password policy should prevent that from happening. It should be best practice. And lastly, the encryption of sensitive data. We have found that there's clear text social security numbers inside the boarding passes, and either hashing those or preventing the use of social security numbers should be the perfect remediation for that. And lastly, thank you very much, Raccoons. We had a wonderful time working with you, and is there any questions from y'all?
Yeah, thank you. It was really solid. So what I'm not clear on is what model do you do to determine what's critical, high, low risk for us?
Absolutely, I can answer that. So we utilize a common classification standard known as CVSS. This is an industry standard way to assess the criticality of technical vulnerabilities. We did this, and we also considered the business impact of each vulnerability. So if something was say, public passwords we found, that would be very critical because it would allow them to get into your system easily.
Yeah, I was reading an article the other day that CVSS, a lot of folks use that, but it's really one-dimensional, right? It's just the brutality, you might say, of it, but it doesn't give us the relative risk to us.
How did you arrive at the key recommendations for us?
So the key recommendations, we primarily focus on just some of the general findings that we saw in total, just because we wanted to recommend resolutions that would be able to target as many findings as we could. A lot of them tied into the actual